for March 5th, 2015 to order. Can I get a roll call for members, please?
Alan Bucknam is absent. Steve Timms.
Here.
Scott Ohm.
Here.
Emery Dorsey.
Here.
Amanda Weaver.
Here.
Donna Kimsey.
Here.
Thank you.
The next order on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Is there a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the order of the agenda.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Call for a vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
Is there a motion to approve the order of the minutes for January 15th, 2015?
I put a motion forward to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Call for a vote.
Motion approved, 5-0. Thank you.
This is the time for any person to speak on any subject not appearing on the agenda. Looking into the audience, I see none. So we will close that. Let's move on to, I'd like to open the public hearing for case number ZOA-15-01, an ordinance providing for the sunset of the Animal Welfare and Control Commission. Can I please get a staff report?
Sure. I don't have a presentation, but I will make a few comments for you tonight. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to review what is really a quite simple change in Chapter 26, but related to the sunset of the Animal Welfare and Control Commission. It was a policy decision made by City Council, and there's a brief history in the staff memo to sunset that board. Their role has changed since their inception in the 1970s, and after about a year or so of discussions and work between City Council, the City Attorney's Office, the Police Department, and the Commission and a consultant, it was decided that that was the most appropriate decision. Planning Division and Community Development hasn't been involved in that decision at all, but because the sunsetting does affect Chapter 26, you are reviewing the code amendment. And so there are two paragraphs in the zoning code that are affected. Animal Welfare Control Commission was referenced in regards to the keeping of large animals. And so those two references will be replaced with reference to the Chief of Police and to the Community Services Team Supervisor. Code enforcement and animal control have been the responsibility of the police department and code enforcement for the past while, and so staff does feel that that's an appropriate amendment, and we are recommending approval of this code change. In terms of next steps, City Council will review the ordinance later this month, and with me tonight is Division Chief Jim Lawrence if you did have any more substantive questions, but that's all that I have for you tonight.
Thank you. Would any of the fellow commissioners like to ask any questions?
I don't have any.
Okay. What? I would entertain a motion then. Or, excuse me, before I do that, I will open up the citizens forum. Seeing that there are no citizens, I will close that forum. Now I'd like to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I do move to recommend approval of the proposed ordinance providing for the sunset of the Animal Welfare and Control Commission.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Commissioner Weaver?
May I ask questions during discussion as well?
I believe, I think, yes, I believe you can ask questions.
Okay, all right. And it simply means, so I'd like to present. My only concern about this is being a large animal owner in Wheat Ridge. I've worked quite a bit with code enforcement, and I generally find their animal expertise to be very good. However, it's not agricultural-based farm knowledge. And so my concern in not, the Animal Commission in the past at least, has been a group of people that of all sorts of pets to farm animal owners and keepers. And I think there's a really helpful piece of citizen involvement in having that conversation, especially as we are openly encouraging urban agriculture. So I don't want it to become, I think it's created a really great intermediate place for citizens to come together and be heard by other citizens regarding some of these animal issues. I'm just thinking of some of the things that we've gone through with code changes, with goats and things like that. So it's for that reason that, and I might have to sort of go back and ask more. I'm realizing that I did have some questions of the officer just regarding where code enforcement and animal control on the police side sort of view this segue, because it's not just pets that we're dealing with, and it's animals that have to do with businesses and things like that. Does that make sense?
If I could comment too, just
Okay.
just to clarify, so at least for the purpose of Chapter 26, the previous responsibility of the commission was to review manure management plans and then to field nuisance complaints, essentially. And so it was more of an issue of sort of the day-to-day administrative tasks. If there's going to be a policy change or a code amendment, certainly that's the type of thing that's heard in more of a public forum with study sessions, with city council, with you guys. So we're not trying to exclude the variety of, inputs or backgrounds. But from a day-to-day, when a citizen calls and makes a complaint, they don't want to wait necessarily to the next Animal Welfare Commission meeting to have something handled.
Okay.
So I absolutely hear what you're saying, and Jimmy may be able to add to that. But it was more related to sort of their function, and not trying to exclude different approaches to keeping animals.
So I can tell you that our community services officers, that's what the exact title of them now, they attend different levels of training with large animals, and I didn't bring the specific names of these courses that
Sure,
they attend,
sure.
but we do have that kind of training. We have relationships with Jefferson County to assist in areas like that. And there are several members on the Animal Welfare and Control Commission that have expertise in certain levels.
Sure.
Barb Hansen, her llamas, and they will still be available to us. We could call and work with. We also have a person that works with feral cats. This is more of a business keeping kind of situation with the commission, and not necessarily their ability to help in animal situations.
Okay. I guess my concern, and this is actually something that happened this last spring and summer, was the place where that intermediate place between when code gets enforced and animals often, either there's a threat of animals being taken away before sort of the whole story unfolds, if that makes sense. So to give you an example, when we dealt with the goat code issue earlier in the year, last year, when that person moved to Wheat Ridge initially, there was an immediate code violation because she brought the goats onto the property, and the Animal Commission was able to find some solutions short of those animals being removed immediately. And that's my concern, is as a large animal owner, it would be not okay for someone to come in and move my animals to a shelter because of the fact that I'm breeding. There's issues around health and what am I trying to say? Sorry. Just general animal health management that while I know, and the officers are very well trained. I've worked with several people, and I think it's just excellent. But I was just thinking about it, even with what I am doing with grazing my goats on city property with Park and Rec. There's that intermediate place of farm animals are just very, very different than household pets. And so when a goat gets out, it's a different kind of scenario than if a dog gets out. And I would really, it's not that I feel like this commission necessarily has to oversee the code enforcement rules that have been put in place, but I just feel like there should be a place for some sort of citizen input around these sort of extraordinary circumstances as we're having both pets and urban agriculture and all of these different things in Wheat Ridge, and we're trying to be welcoming of that. That's how I would feel as a pet owner, as a large animal business owner. So I guess that would be my opinion on not having this sunset. I don't know if there are any other options or if I can offer a different motion at this time.
Right. And I completely understand where you're coming from in all of your comments. I just want to remind the commission that the policy decision to sunset the Animal Welfare Commission is not what you're considering tonight. That decision is council's jurisdiction.
Okay.
And that's determined in the charter that they have sort of the sole discretion to create and dissolve all boards and commissions.
Okay.
So there may be more elaboration, sort of the reasons why or what the future may hold at the hearing before council, which is a little bit more global than what you're hearing tonight because we can only look at chapter 26.
So we're just deciding to allow this to sunset per.
We're just reviewing the textual change in 26, which is to make sure that there's a person that's designated to fulfill the role for the purpose of the zoning code.
I understand.
It is part of this larger conversation, so it is challenging, similar to the marijuana ordinance. You know, a lot of that policy decision was at a council level.
Okay.
But I think your comments are definitely, you know, well,
But it sounds like my comments would be more appropriate at the city council.
potentially, yeah.
Thank you, I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
no problem.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Anybody else have any comments or discussion? No. Since we have a motion, correct, in a second, let's call for a vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
Thank you.
Sorry for taking everybody's time.
Okay, the next item is the election of officers.
So every March, I believe, it's time to elect new officers, a chair and a vice chair. And just to remind you, or in case you haven't had to vote before, I'll pass out a Post-it note and a pen in case you need one. And it's done by secret ballot. We don't nominate people, so you just pick somebody, write them on the card. We'll vote for chair first, and then we'll do another round of voting for vice chair. And you can vote for an absent member, so Alan would be eligible to be voted for if you wanted to slime somebody that's not here. We did have two more commissioners got appointed at the last council meeting. They have not been sworn in yet, so that's why they're not here, but we are supposed to go ahead and vote now anyway, so pass these out. Does anybody need a pen?
I just have a question.
Question?
I know that the chair can't be in that chair again, but Ann's no longer on planning commission? Did she not choose to
She did not renew.
not reapply? Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah. She did not renew. Yeah.
I do need a pen. I can. I do need a lot of these.
Are you right-handed or left-handed?
I am right-handed.
Good, boy, that's
That was a lucky break, literally.
this is chair,
Who wants to be chair?
Alan, I think. I think it is.
All right, so we have three votes for Alan and 2 votes for Scott. So we have Alan as chair. And then we'll do another vote for vice chair. the chair. The chair may not succeed himself. There is no statement regarding that for vice chair. And Scott will be our vice chair again. Thank you for that. Okay. So we don't have to play musical chairs for the rest of the meeting then. I do have just 2 more brief items to talk about real quick in terms of updates, if there's nothing else. So every year, we try to make it to an early city council meeting to get consensus from them on our plans for our code amendment goals for 2015, or for the year. So we went on Monday to talk about 2015. There were 5 code amendments that we had proposed that they agreed with that are essentially needing to update our code. So accessory dwelling units, I think we've talked a little bit about that with this group. A lot of communities are looking at ADUs. Jefferson County just adopted an accessory dwelling unit ordinance to allow ADUs in certain contexts with certain rules. We think it's beneficial in Wheat Ridge because we've got a lot of folks who want to age in place. We get on a weekly basis, we get inquiries about having parents move in and have an apartment over the garage, whatever that may be. So it's something that we probably need to look into. There was a housing diversification study that council commissioned last year that included that as a recommendation of something to look into just in the name of expanding options. So that's one of the items. Sign code modernization, I know we've talked about that quite a bit needing to be updated, so addressing digital signs and digital billboards and just generally changes in sign technologies, things like sign spinners, just full sections of sign categories that we don't address. Exterior lighting standards, again, needing to respond to new technology. Our code refers to metal halide lights, and we know that we're in LEDs and other types of technologies. We don't have any quantitative standards to enforce photometric plans, so we want to look at that. Cell facilities, again, a technology issue. We haven't touched that section of the code since 2000, and so obviously that technology has changed a lot over the last 15 years. And then finally, the last one that we had presented to council as sort of the lowest priority potentially is that we don't address microbreweries at all. I don't know if that industry is cooling off at all since the market's pretty saturated, but we have microbreweries in Wheat Ridge, and that's mostly because they've been at a smaller scale. We've had inquiries from brewers who want to do a larger scale, and we just, is it really commercial? If it has a tasting room, what is that? How does that fit? It's not very clean. So those were the few that we had proposed to council, and they agreed that those look good. There was one additional topic that was raised by council that they've asked us to pursue, which hadn't really been on our radar yet. So we'll look into some of the questions, and then I'm not sure if it will move forward or not. But there was a person at the city council study session who was talking about East Wheat Ridge and how the lots are really narrow, and particularly on corner lots where we enforce the same setback as your front yard setback. That they were saying that it makes it difficult to scrape and rebuild because the lots are too small and the setbacks are onerous. So there was the question raised by council of whether or not we should be encouraging or facilitating scrapes like you see in Denver. So I'm not sure if we should be or not, but that's certainly what they asked us to look into to see how the zoning code either is restricting scrapes or could be facilitating scrapes or something like that. So staff's feeling is that would require some public input. We haven't heard any negative input from developers, but there was some, mixed opinions, I think, on council on Monday night. So that topic hadn't been on our list and has now been asked to be the first priority. So we may or may not be coming back to you with that. Any
Has there
comments?
been any discussion or thought on micro units?
That will probably be captured as part of the ADU ordinance, looking at I think the ADU ordinance may proceed as sort of a housing choice kind of ordinance in terms of looking at smaller units, smaller lots, and the building code implications, I think, for both are going to have to be considered for ADUs or micro houses. I've had one inquiry in the last year about mini houses, small houses. Any other comments on that list? No? Okay. And then the only other update, thanks to those of you who could make it to that ULI presentation. I know I got emails from some folks who were interested but couldn't make it. So just a quick summary. ULI, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit organization whose membership includes brokers and designers and developers, and they're a nationwide organization, and their Colorado chapter offers what's called a technical advisory panel, or a TAP, and their purpose is to pull a handful, half dozen members and focus on a land use issue or problem. And they approached us and offered to give us some ideas for the Ward Road Station area. As you'll recall, we updated that station plan or sub-area plan in 2013, and it allows for mixed use, but it remains relatively vague in terms of some of the recommendations. And we've had developers approach us at a staff level with ideas for development that our gut reaction has been either that doesn't quite fit what we thought we wanted, or the density is too low, and so but we haven't been able to articulate a clear vision of what we want to see there. And part of that is just the challenge of what the city's vision is and what TOD best practices and what the market realities are. There's a lot of stations coming online, and certainly the context of our station is pretty different than a Denver station, and so it's attracting potentially a different kind of interest. And so, long story short, the panel worked with us for a day and a half. We took them on a tour. We set up about 30 different stakeholder interviews. So they made essentially in a closed door session. We didn't watch any of this, but they interviewed property owners and brokers and housing experts and major employers from the area, a variety of folks, and then did a work session and culminated in a presentation where they essentially said, we appreciate your vision, but we don't think that you're going to get sort of that grand density that your zoning would otherwise allow unless you want to wait a cycle or two in the real estate market. So their recommendation was to maybe focus on more of an employment-based TOD area that capitalizes on some of the creative industrial uses that you see, like industry and galvanize in Denver, sort of co-working options, maybe outdoor rec industry. But they had some good ideas that were more outside the box. So we had always expressed to any of the stakeholders and on the invitation that this is it wasn't a city-sponsored process. We know it didn't have public involvement. But they will be producing a written report in the next couple of weeks that summarize their findings, and we will present those to council to get their input as to whether or not they think that those recommendations should have, if we need to modify our sub-area plan, or if we should tweak a couple things, or what we should do moving forward. So it was interesting. We'll certainly share that report with you all when we get it. And I imagine that the presentation to council would be at a study session, so you'd be certainly invited to attend that as well. And I think that's everything I had. Any questions on the ULI event? No. It wasn't what we expected to hear, but I think it was well delivered and relatively well received. So we'll see what happens next.
I just want to say thank you for inviting us. I did attend,
Yeah.
and I know.
I mean, it's a piece of ground. It's a toughie.
Mhm.
That's 2/3 developed
Yep.
in a way that we wouldn't want to develop it if it was all raw ground. I mean,
Right.
so you got to live with what we got.
Yep.
There is no, the other third is what we're talking about. I mean, what you do with that to make it fit with that's already developed. I mean, it's
It's challenging.
it's challenging, and I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think my only comment is I saw some potential. I understood what they were saying, what the need was right now. And my only comment is what I see happening, I would say throughout the Denver metro area, is some of the most interesting buildings are the ones that they have repurposed, either into commercial or residential. And that I could see that project possibly some type of hybrid of maybe starting with a different plan and then maybe ending down the road something else, but in that same building. So it has a lot of potential. I thought that was really interesting, though, what they said. So I appreciate that, and I'm glad that there's it was a good mix of people at that meeting.
Great. That's everything that I had. We won't have the second meeting in March. There's nothing on the agenda. And I think that's all my updates.
Is there any other items?
Question for staff. I know that there's a certain golf course development that's been in the news out by Applewood. Are we contiguous at all to that?
What's that?
Are we contiguous? Do we have
Yes.
the ability to annex that if
Yes.
that circumstance were to arise?
Yes.
Okay.
So that Applewood Golf Course is at 32nd west of Youngfield, and it is immediately west of our boundary, and it's sort of there's a tiny contiguity with what would be Clear Creek Crossing development. There had been some discussion, I think, at some point above my pay grade about whether or not that should be annexed. It's a land use application for a planned residential development that is now being processed by the county. We actually have staff members who live in that area who got invited to the neighborhood meeting that had to get cut short because they had too many people in too small of a space, so they're gonna have to reschedule that one. But no, it's not our case for now, fortunately, yeah.
Are there any other items? Could I see a motion, or anybody want to make a motion for adjourning?
I move to adjourn.
Second? Second. Call for vote.